The monster study was a stuttering experiment performed on 22 orphan children in Davenport, Iowa in 1939. Fun fact, your boy Demand had to go to speech therapy when he was younger because my brain tried to speak faster than my lips could carry the words. That's besides the point. It was conducted by Wendell Johnson at the University of Iowa. Graduated student Mary Tudar conducted the experiment under Johnson's supervision. Half the children received positive speech therapy, raising the fluency of their speech, and the other half negative speech therapy, belittling the children for speech imperfections. Many of the normal speaking orphan children who received negative therapy in the experiments suffered negative psychological effects and some retained speech problems for the rest of their lives. Wait, I can actually fix that? Okay, great. If you're about to make a dick joke, just know that's funny. It was dubbed the Monster Study, as some of Johnson's peers were horrified that he would experiment on orphan children to confirm a hypothesis. The experiment was kept hidden for fear Johnson's reputation would be tarnished in the wake of the human experiments conducted by the Nazis during World War II. Because the results of the studies were never published in any peer-reviewed journal, Godar's thesis is the only official record he tells of experiments. The University of Iowa publicly apologized for the monster study in 2001. However, Patricia Zabrowski, University of Iowa's assistant professor of speech pathology and audiology, notes that the data that resulted from the experiment is the largest collection of scientific information on the phenomenon of stuttering, and that Johnson's work was the first to discuss the importance of the stutterer's thoughts, attitudes, beliefs, and feelings, and continues to influence views on stuttering. So had 22 orphan children, and half the children received positive speech therapy, praising their speech, while the other received negative speech therapy, belittling the children speech imperfection. Now, this experiment's horrible, clearly, because not only are you doing it on children, but you're possibly causing lifelong issues within the children's lives. So, the study. The researchers had 4 questions in mind when carrying out the study. Will removing the label stutterer from those who have been so labeled have any effect on their speech fluency? 2. Will re-endorsement of the label stutterer previously applied to an individual have any effect on their speech fluency? Number 3, will endorsement of the label normal speaker previously applied to an individual have any effect on their speech fluency? They have label stutterer and normal speaker. And finally, number 4, will labeling a person previously regarded as normal speaker a stutterer have any effect on this? So this is interesting because there's trying to see what happens if you have normal speaker like Metal Gear Greed, his sexy voice, and you label him a stutter and you reinforce that belief. Will they start to stutter? I wonder. Here it says they're orphans. They already have lifelong issues. Yeah, but you don't want to compile interest. You know? You don't want to like stack more onto that life sandwich. It's already overloaded. Interesting. Oh, I guess we just have to get into it. See what happens. Place your votes. You know, will removing the label stutter help? I guess, or have any influence? Will endorsing the label stutterer have any effects? Or what if you label a normal speaker a stutterer? Would that have any effect? The research began with a selection of 22 subjects from a veterans orphanage in Iowa. None were told the intent of their research. Sorry. None were told the intent of her research, and they believed that they were there to receive speech therapy. Dora was trying to induce stuttering in healthy children and to see whether telling stutterers that their speech was fine would produce change. Included among these 22 subjects were 10 orphans whom teachers and matrons had marked as stutterers before the study began. Tudor and 5 other graduate students who agreed to serve as judges listened to each of the children speak, graded them on a scale from 1, meaning poor, to 5, meaning fluent, and concurred with the school's assessment. 5 were assigned to Group A. 5 were assigned to Group IA, the experimental set, and would be told that their speech was fine. The 5 in Group IB, the control group, would be told their speech is as bad as people say. Interesting. I would assume if you had children, they were speaking normally, but then you negative reinforced their speech therapy, right? I feel it would have a detriment to the child. Because at that age, depending on how old they are, right? But they were children. I feel it would be horrible for their growth, and because they're influential, right? Whatever you tell them is real, like Santa Claus is real. They'll believe it. Tooth Fairy, real. They'll believe it. What's this mega read? Yeah, I'd like to know the age range of these kids. I would like to know this too. So let's read the next paragraph. The remaining 12 children were chosen at random from the population of normally fluent orphans. 6 of these were assigned to IIA or 2A. These children, ranging in ages, read, from 5 to 15, were told that their speech was horrible, and that they were beginning to stutter, and they must correct this immediately. Final 6 children in Group 2B, similar in the ages of Group 2A, were normal speakers who were to be treated as such and given compliments on their nice enunciation. So we're looking at children ranging from 5 to 15, who's, I would say that's that would be an insane age gap, right? But it was 1939? I don't know if they had an exact pool to pull from, like, we want all children at the ages of 10, right? They were just, and plus, you know, you want to see how influential, like maybe a child at age 5 is less influential than a child at age 15, or maybe vice versa. Who knows? I think it depends on the child, depends on, you know, personality and things like that. But in 1939 years, they were 10 to 20. Yeah. It's, you know, they pulled them straight from the coal mines, Metal Gear Greed. Had coal dust on their face. On the first visit, Tudor tested each child's IQ and identified whether they were left-handed or right-handed. Popular theory at the time held that stuttering was caused by a cerebral imbalance. If, for example, a person was born left-handed but was using their right hand, their nerve impulses would misfire, affecting their speech. I don't know about you that, but if you were left-handed, and I don't know what year this might have been before 1939, but I remember reading somewhere that they would hit your hand with a ruler to correct, like, from correcting you from writing with your left hand. And they would force you to write with your right hand. Literally force you. I don't know if that was like a Catholic school, if that was every school. I'm not sure. But I remember reading somewhere there was someone trying to forcefully make all the children right-handed. Say. Johnson did not believe the theory. Sorry, Chad, I lost my place. Johnson did not believe the theory, but still suggested Tudor test each child's handedness. She had them draw on chalkboards and squeeze the bulb of a dynamometer. Most were right-handed, but left-handed children were present in all the groups. So I guess group 1A, 2B, 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, and they had left-handers in each of the groups. This is interesting. There was no correlation between handedness and speech in the subjects. During this period, they assigned numbers to the children, such as case number 15, experimental group 2A. They found out at the time there's no correlation between if you're left-handed and right-handed speech and subjects. Fair enough. The experiment period lasted from January until late May 1939. And the actual intervention consisted of Tudor arriving to Davenport from Iowa City every few weeks and talking with each child for 45 minutes. She followed an agreed upon script. In her dissertation, she reported that she was talking to stuttering youngsters who were going to be told that they did not stutter. Interesting. So, do you think if you have a child who's stuttering and you tell them, no, you're not stuttering, you just gaslight them? Do you think, or not exactly gaslight them, but like a positive gaslight? Do you think that they would fix their stutter, or their brain, which is their subconscious, would fix it? Find out. She said to them, in part, "You'll outgrow the stuttering, and you will be able to speak even much better than you are speaking now. Pay no attention to what others say about your speaking ability, for undoubtedly they do not realize that this is only a phase." You're literally gaslighting the children, saying, "You'll be fine, bro. You're fine, bro. You'll outgrow it, man. Ignore all the haters sipping that haterade. Only a phase." To the non-stuttering youngsters in Group 2A, who were to be branded stutterers, she said, "The staff has come to the conclusion you have a great deal of trouble with your speech. You have many of the symptoms of a child who is beginning to stutter. You must try to stop yourself immediately. Use your willpower. Do anything to keep from stuttering. Don't ever speak unless you could do it right. You see how..." And then she would say the name of a child in the institution who stuttered heavily. "Stutters, don't you? Well, he undoubtedly started this very same way. So they're gaslighting children on both sides." Like, yeah, you sound like... And I have to remind you that there were non-stutterers in this group. In Group 2A and 2B. And so, that's interesting. They're seeing if you could force a stutter in a child that doesn't have a stutter. The children in 2A responded immediately. This is the negative group, by the way. The children in 2A responded immediately. After a second session with 5-year-old Norma Jean Pugh, Tudor wrote it was very difficult to get her to speak, although she spoke very freely the month before. Another in the group, 9-year-old Betty Rump, practice, practically refuses to talk. A researcher wrote in his final evaluation. Held hand or arm over eyes most of the time. Still the group 2A that was told that you're beginning to stutter. Hazel Potter, age 15 now, the oldest in the group, became much more conscious of herself and talked less. Potter also began to interject and to snap her fingers in frustration. She was asked why she said "a" too much, or so much. Because I'm afraid I can't see the next word. Why did you snap your fingers? Because I was afraid I was going to say "eh" or "ah." Okay. The children's schoolwork fell off. All the children's schoolwork fell off, sorry. One of the boys began refusing to recite in class. The other 11-year-old Clarence Pfeiffer started anxiously correcting himself. He stopped and told me he was going to have trouble on words before he said them, Peter reported. She asked him how he knew. He said the sound wouldn't come out. Feels like it's stuck there. Wow. These orphans didn't have, in Group 2A, didn't have speech impediments. They didn't have stutters. They were told that they were going to have stutters. So a 9-year-old practically refused to talk. Held their hand or arms up when they tried to talk, right? A 5-year-old barely wanted to talk, even though a month before that, she was making noises and giggling and doing all sorts of things, right? Is what I'm reading. And a 15-year-old, the oldest, became much more conscious of herself and talked less. That's insane. And then if you go on over to the one of the boys, right, an 11-year-old, corrected himself because he thought he felt that the words wouldn't come out. This is some heavy psychological damage. These poor kids, says Kiwi. Yeah, this is some heavy psychological damage. I'm getting an itchy throat. Sorry about that. The 6th orphan, Mary Kolaski, a 12-year-old, grew withdrawn, fractious. During their sessions, Tudor asked whether her best friend knew about her stuttering. Kolaski's muttered, "No." "Why not?" asks Tudor, I assume. Kolaski shuffled to her feet, saying, "I hardly ever talked to her." Years later, she ran away from the orphanage, eventually ended up in the rougher industrial school for girls, simultaneously escaping her human experimentation. But I'm going to assume that just because you left experimentation doesn't mean it didn't have lasting effects, right? Because no one told you it was like lol JK, just a science experiment. Like, she probably had speech impediment her whole life, or just psychological trauma. Whew. Makes you feel better. They're all probably gone now. Maybe. Statistically, probably. Mary Tudor herself wasn't untouched. This is the experimenter. 3 times after her experiment had officially ended, she returned to the orphanage to voluntarily provide follow-up care. She told the 2A children that they didn't stutter after all. The impact, however well-meaning, was questionable. She wrote to Johnson about the orphans in a slightly defensive letter dated April 22, 1940. She wrote, I believe that in time they will recover, but we certainly made a definite impression on them. What? So I guess, do you think the doctor felt bad? And she went three times, you know, 3 times to provide aftercare, follow-up care. What happened to the kid that ran away? What about her? What about all these other kids who were suffering? Like, you tell them one thing, right? And then you immediately tell them the next thing. I feel they just assume you're lying. What's up, Suji? How you doing? Thank you for the daily taxes. And I just, what? I feel like she should get some sort of compensation, right? And even then, that still won't be enough. But turns out, on the 17th of August, 2007, 7 of the orphan children were awarded a total of $925,000 by the state of Iowa for lifelong psychological and emotional scars caused by 6 months of torment during the University of Iowa experiment. So, they started this experiment in 1939, and in August of 2007, they still had lifelong psychological scars. So, that goes to show you, right, of how influenceable children are, and that these experiments are insane, causing all sorts of trouble, all sorts of just. And if you think about it, it was just words, right? But it was the perception that these children have. He says, I don't know if she felt bad or wanted to see the damage. It's like a serial killer returning to the scene of the crime. It's dreadful. Insane. The study learned that although none of the children became stutterers, okay, that's interesting. Ooh, some of them became self-conscious and reluctant to speak. Spokesman for the university called the a spokesman for the University of Iowa called the experiment regrettable and added, this is the study that should never be considered defensible in any era. In no way would I ever think about defending this study. In no way. It's more than unfortunate. Before her death, Mary Tudor expressed deep regret about her role in the monster study and maintained that Wendell Johnson could have done more to reverse the negative effects of orphans, children's. This actually reminds me. I don't know if we already did this on Campfire Stories. Do you guys remember the monkey daughter? Not money daughter. Monkey daughter. Monkey daughter. Raises, yes, here you go. The Horror of the Ape and the Child Experiment, 1930. We're gonna read this one. It is gonna be a shorter Campfire Story because Doc isn't here. I feel naked without him. Absolutely naked. Kellogg style. I think it is Kellogg style. Yeah, we're gonna read this one. Kellogg study. Where is Doc? Doc, I think, is still recovering. But to be fair, I overslept. So I messed up, unfortunately. But I do believe he is still recovering. So we're gonna end this campfire off with one more psychological study, right? And I think this ties in for, or this ties in with how influential kids are, right? It's the Kellogg study, the ape, and the child. And my throat hurts. Nothing like a little Pepsi Zero Sugar. Well, do that whistle. Choo choo, baby. Choo choo. So, Winthrop Niles Kellogg was a psychologist best known for his study of the ape and the child, which involved his observations of raising a chimpanzee infant along with his son. Kellogg and his yeah, and you'll never guess where they're from. You'll never guess where. Kellogg and his wife took into their Florida home a female chimpanzee, Gua, 7.5 months old, when their son Donald was 10 months old. Their purpose was to learn what similarities and differences would develop between Donald and Gua if treated alike in every detail. One moment. Carbonation. All right, fellas? So their purpose was to learn what similarities, there we go, and differences would develop between Donald, the 10-month-old little boy, and Gua, the 7.5-month chimpanzee, if treated alike. Detail. Chimpanzee was dressed like an infant, in napkins and later rompers. She was wheeled in a carriage, sat in a high chair, slept in a bed, and was kissed goodnight. No special effort was made to teach Goa spectacular stunts, but rather to teach her the same things a fond parent would do with a baby girl. The experiment was carried out with a careful day-by-day record of observations, films, and tests for a period of 9 months. Kellogg found that the chimpanzee was able to take on many human ways. Goa wore shoes and walked upright, eat a spoon, drink from a glass, and open doors before the boy even acquired these abilities. She imitated human gestures and ways of showing affection, like hugging and kissing Donald and the parents. Like most children, she made a fuss when the parents went out and left them alone. Goa's rate of development was much faster than them, especially in the motor skills of climbing and jumping. She also learned to respond to 95 words and phrases such as kiss Donald, shake hands, and show me your nose. However, she never learned to utter words or phrases other than to make known her wishes through grunts and squeals. Gua's toilet training was appreciably slower than the control. What? Gua's toilet training was slower than the control achieved by the boy. So the boy was toilet training faster, but was developing motor skills at a slower rate. Although the chimp progressed faster than the boy in the earliest stages, it became evident at the end of the experience she was falling behind, especially in the matter of intellectual adaptation and demands. The early superiority is attributed to the fact that in arthropods generally mature earlier than humans. A monkey reaches puberty at about 4 years, whereas humans reach puberty between 12 and 14 on average, with girls usually reaching puberty before boys. The report of this experiment by Dr. Kellogg and his wife indicated that an animal could achieve a good deal of human socializing, training, and human association. It was also noted there are definite limits to the degree of humanization that can be achieved by non-human species, regardless of the amount of socializing efforts. So, once again, a child, right? And if that chimpanzee was raised in its normal habitat, it would act and develop the normal chimpanzee. Now, what I want to know is what was running through this chimpanzee's head as it got older, right? Did it know it wasn't human? But did it know that it was different? Because she ate with a spoon, drank from the glass, opened doors, and she was able to communicate. She did human gestures and ways of showing affection. She knew 95 words and phrases. So where was the turning point in where or maybe there was no turning point. Maybe the chimpanzee just thought they were a different type of human. What did the little boy think? I want to know. Like when the boy hit, like, I don't know, 6, 7. Were they like, wow, that's one hairy child, or did they just assume that they were like brother and sister? I wish they had more information on this. Let's see if I can find more information on this. Aw, I did find more information. Now I'm sad. Okay, so sorry, I scrolled to the middle of the story, and now like they're introducing new characters like Ada, Wim. Oh no, there's more monkey. There's more chimpanzee. What? They didn't just do Donald. Wim apparently acquired a variety of human-like behaviors, including more upright walking, being mostly toilet trained, and comprehending a wide range of orders, and even displaying her problem-solving abilities. Gua, who was the first chimpanzee we talked about, capacity to communicate was evidently constrained by both her inheritance and her status as a chimpanzee. In other words, nurture can only go so far before nature catches up. The experiment first gained attention when an article about it appeared in the American Psychological Journal, because the article was written to appeal to as many readers as possible and naturally attracted a lot of press attention. By the time a full book about the experiment was published in 1933, the study's accessibility had led to polarizing opinions. The biggest criticism came from using Donald as a test subject, which is understandable given that it was Lola's, don't know who that character is, insistence that the study be terminated after the extended period of 9 months. Okay, I believe I read that in the last one. Many critics noted that Gua's, okay, they misspelled, this article is all over the place. They misspelled Gua's name, I'm upset. Many critics noted that Gua's being taken from her biological mother at such a young age and the suddenness ending of her adoption must have been very traumatic for the young chimp to be ripped twice her perceived home. The use of Donald, how did the subject fare later in life? Unfortunately, both participants' lives would end tragic. Gua would die of pneumonia on December 21st, 1933, less than a year after leaving the Kellogg family and shortly after turning 3 years old. Donald lived to the age of 43 when in 1937 he self-detonated. Tests throughout the study were questionable, where the child was frustrated in a broom experiment, hit on the head, and started with the gun. What? That last part was interesting. Tests throughout the experiment were questionable, where the child was frustrated in a broom experiment, hit on the head, and started with the gun. What? There's no such thing. There was no experiments. They were just hanging out together. That's interesting. That the chimpanzee would be. I misspelled Gua's name. Is this an AI article? Have I been bamboozled? What's up, Shia? They spelled Gua G-U-A, and then G-U-W-A, and then G-W-A. And then they wait, are these two different? Oh, hold on. Nope, that's the same chimpanzee. Gua. So they ripped the chimpanzee from her biological mother. And then they treated this chimpanzee for 9 months as if it was just another sibling, another human being. And although Gua did advance in motor skills and things like that and learned 95 words, different phrases, nature just, there's only so much nurture could do. That's interesting. So I guess instincts are real, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, here's something. As the experiment went on, she began to construct a nest out of her bedding. There's something that chimpanzee in the wild twigs and trees. She hadn't observed anyone else doing this, which indicated that the behavior may be inherited, but that it could be mistaken for an infant playing in their bed at night. So yeah, this chimpanzee was taken out of nature, was nurtured as a human being, but still had the chimpanzee instincts. Shio, you will get Doc when you have earned Doc. Alright? You gotta earn Doc to get Doc. Doc is a very busy man. He's out here doing things. He's doing big things. Big old grand things. I think I want one more story. There's a short story. The monster study was, in my opinion, more interesting than, because the monster study had like long term. Well, I guess we don't know. We didn't follow the life of Donald. It might have had long term effects for Donald too. I don't. Little Albert. You know what? Little Albert fits with the theme of what we're doing. Little Albert. Yeah. And then we'll end this out. Little Albert. Chat, have you heard of the Little Albert experiment? It's dark. Not as I don't know. I can't rate Little Albert experiment against the monster study because, man, the monster study was rough. Those kids had it rough. I've heard of Prince. Fair enough, Mel Gear. Fair enough. Well, you get the Prince Albert on the Little Albert, don't you know? One of the most famous figures in psychology history isn't a psychologist at all. Little Albert, as he was called. was a synonym for a pseudonym of a young boy at the center of an infamous psychological experiment in which he was conditioned to fear rats. Fear that also extended to other singular objects, including fluffy white toys and a white beard. The little Albert experiment was a famous psychological oh yeah, we're getting dark here at the Doc and Man Show Campfire Podcast Stories, let me tell you. The little Albert experiment was a famous psychological experiment conducted by behaviorist John B. Watson. I remember reading the story in my textbooks. Okay. So, behaviorist John B. Watson and graduated student Rosalia Rayner. Previously, Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov had conducted experiments demonstrating the conditioning process in dogs. Oh, pretty famous. One of the most famous experiments, the Pavlov conditioning. Watson took Pavlov's research a step further by showing that emotional reactions could be Emotional reactions could be classically conditioned people. Interesting. Let's talk about what happened in the little Albert experiment. The experiment's participant was a child that Watson and Rayner called Albert B, but is known particularly today as Little Albert. When little Albert was 9 months old, Watson and Rayner exposed him to a series of stimuli, including a white rat, rabbit, a monkey, masks, and burning newspapers, and observed the boy's reaction. At the experiment outset, the little boy showed no fear of any objects he was shown. What Watson did next changed everything. Next time Albert was exposed to a rat, Watson made a loud noise by hitting a metal pipe with a hammer. Naturally, the child began to cry after hearing the loud noise. After repeatedly pairing the white rat with the loud noise, Albert began to expect a frightening noise whenever he saw the white rat. Soon, Albert began to cry simply after seeing the rat. Watson Rayner wrote, "The instant the rat was shown, the baby began to cry. Almost instantly, he turned sharply to the left, fall over on his side, raised himself on all fours, and began to crawl away so rapidly that he was caught with difficulty before reaching the edge of the table." So they conditioned this 9-month-old to dramatically and drastically retreat because it was so frightened by the white rat, by using a metal pipe with a hammer. Conditioning this child. In addition to demonstrating that emotional responses could be conditioned to influence, Watson and Rayner also observed a phenomenon known as stimulus generalization. Stimulus generation happens to things similar to conditioned stimulus. Stimulus generalization happens when things similar to the conditioned stimulus evoke a similar response. After conditioning, Albert feared not only the white rat, but a wide variety of similar white objects as well. His fear included other furry objects, including Raynor's fur coat and Watson wearing a Santa Claus beard. Whew. While the experiment is one of the psychology's most famous and is included in nearly every introductory psychological course, it is widely criticized for several reasons. First, the experiment design and process were not carefully constructed. Watson and Raynor did not develop an objective means to evaluate Albert's reactions, instead of relying on their own subjective interpretations. Interesting. So, chat, you guys want to find out what happened to old little Albert? See what happened to this man? You know? Do you guys want to find out? Do you think it ends good? Do you think it ends happily? Probably ends bad. Well, Nigger agreed. Find out if you're right, brother. Find out. The question of what happened to little Albert has long been one of psychology's mysteries. Before Watson and Raynor could attempt to cure little Albert, he and his mother moved away. Some envisioned the boy growing into a man with a strange phobia of white furry objects. In 2009, researchers published the results of their attempt to track down the boy's identity. As reported in the American Psychologist, a 7-year search led by psychologist Hall P. Beck led to this discovery of a child the researchers believed might be a little Albert. After tracking down and locating the original experiments, and the possible identity of the boy's mother, it was suggested that little Albert was actually a boy named Douglas Barrett. Unfortunately, the researchers discovered that Douglas had died on May 10th, 1925, at the age of 6, of hydrocephalus, which is a buildup of fluid in his brain. Bro, the sneeze just came on and just ended abruptly. That was crazy. Sorry about that. So he died at the age 6, which he had suffered since birth, the buildup of fluid in his brain. In 2012, Beck and Alan J. Fruedland reported that Douglas was not the healthy, normal child Watson described in his 1920 experiment. Instead, they suggest that Watson may have known about and deliberately concealed the boy's neurological condition. So we know